Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Whitaker. I'm with Merkle Science. I'm a law enforcement director over here. I should say good morning, good day, and good afternoon because I know people all around the world are watching this. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you coming on. Today we have Asset Reality with us. They are a company. I'm not going to take Joanna's spiel away. I just want to give a quick introduction. They're a crypto seizure company. So I'll let her take care of the rest of that. But thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. This is the first of the Merkle Meets webinars that we are going to have, hopefully monthly, with different people. So with that in mind, if you have anybody who you think should be on this show or on this podcast, please shoot us an email, shoot me an email and say, hey, I think this person would be great. We're looking for bringing on some really good people in the future. So hopefully you'll join us for those two. And I'm going to give a welcome to Asset Reality, and I'm going to let Joanna start here to tell us what Asset Reality is all about. Joanna, it's all yours.
Sure. Thank you for having us, Robert. We're very excited to be here today. So give you a quick background on myself. I spent about 10 years at the U.S. Marshal Service Asset Forfeiture Division, where I ran the Complex Assets Unit. So my team handled all ongoing businesses or complex financial instruments that were subject to federal forfeiture. And not too long after I got there, I got a call that said, hey, can you take a few crypto for us? It's like a Bitcoin or something. And it wasn't just a few, it was 175,000 Bitcoin in the Silk Road case. So needless to say, we very quickly jumped right in and started to build the cryptocurrency program for DOJ. And while I did that, I saw the need for a comprehensive seized asset management platform that included monitoring cryptocurrency. So I started at Asset Reality a little over 2 years ago to do exactly that. Working in client relations, I'm helping to build our seized asset management company, which simplifies the asset recovery process. So a little bit more about our company. The majority of our team has a law enforcement background, which you'll hear from Matt and Jim as well. We operate in the US and globally, and we work exclusively with law enforcement agencies or entities that are operating under a court order. So insolvency practitioners, bankruptcy proceedings, basically no retail clients. This is our sole focus. We have a seizure app and a platform that empowers agencies to effectively seize, manage, and deploy assets. So the app, you'll instantly generate a wallet address to seize crypto if you're on site. And then on our platform, that's going to be the secure, auditable system with real-time logging of those types of assets. So no more spreadsheets or multiple systems for tracking inventory the way we're all used to in the government. Beyond the tech, we also offer professional services, SOP development for asset forfeiture programs, especially crypto. Matt, Jim, and I have all done that type of work for various US government agencies. And we also offer specialized training if it's crypto investigations, asset management. I know we'll touch on VAT later, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, Joanna, let me ask you a question real quick. So you were there when the Silk Road coins came in, is that correct?
Yes.
And so what was that, about 2014, 2015 when that seizure happened? There's
Yeah,
175,000 coins?
Yes, I auctioned about 175,000 coins across 2014 and 2015 in 4 different seizures, in 4 different liquidations.
So when those first come in, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
What went through your mind? Like, were you like, what in the world's Bitcoin? Or were you thinking to yourself, holy cow, how am I going to do this?
It was a bit of both. We had heard of cryptocurrency before, and we kind of figured at some point we'd have a case that involved it, but no one really knew, right? We were kind of like, is this here to stay? Is this a fad? Like, what's going to happen here? So we tentatively started to develop a program because we weren't sure if this was going to be a one-off. Like by the end of 2015, are we ever going to do this again? But it became pretty clear that it was going to continue because over time, it wasn't just Silk Road. Every agency started seizing Bitcoin and then other types of cryptocurrency. So by the time we were in 2018, 2020, and we had done all these auctions, it was like, okay, this is here to stay.
Yeah. I remember back, I guess around 2015 or 16, we actually called asset forfeiture with DHS and said, hey, we need to see some Bitcoin, or they would give you an address, like here, send it over here. That's it. Nothing else.
Mhm.
No, like
Mhm.
not real protocol or anything. Just like, yeah, sweep it onto here. So things have certainly changed, no doubt, since then. Um, with talking about changes, what today are and you don't have to go too deep because I don't want to give government secrets away, but can you name some of the differences that from like when you got 175 tokens, didn't know where they're coming from except Silk Road, to today? Like what's the big difference today?
Well, the big difference today is there's much more of a procedure in place. You've got appropriate separation of duties. You have somewhere to store a hard drive. You've got more auditing procedures around the process. And those were just things that needed to be developed over time. I'd say another big change is around the time of Silk Road, the Mt. Gox exchange had just collapsed. So we were all very hesitant to be using an exchange to store any cryptocurrency. So everything was done through cold storage and everything was done through that auction model. And then over time, you started to get some big players in the industry. It became more acceptable to use an exchange for liquidations, which then
Hmm.
evolved into using OTC desks. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of these cases have such large forfeitures that you need to be using an OTC desk so you're not affecting market.
Yeah, I remember the first time the government sold off a bunch of tokens and it affected the market, and there was a kind of a big outcry about the government auctioning off so many bitcoins at one time that the market actually was impacted. Um, so Joanna, thank you very much. We're going to come back to you. You're not off the hook yet, so stick around. Matt, I'm going to go to you next. If you could give us a brief intro, and then we're gonna put you on the hot seat for a few minutes.
No worries. Hi, everyone. Matt St. Jean. Um, Thanks for having us. Like Joanna said, I joined Asset Reality in September, retired in June of 24 after nearly 28 years as a federal agent with the US government, retired from IRS, worked a couple other agencies over the years. And since 2019, I was embedded with our cybercrimes unit out of DC. Uh, Main reason for that was I was a full-time computer forensic agent. So being embedded with that group as we were getting stood up and getting into these cyber cases was a cool model to have. And IRS was on the forefront of that. Was pretty interesting and fun time. And as you may have seen in the news, we've got several agents who are experts in the field now who've left the government. And some of their big cases and our large seizures. And it was fun to work with those guys and do the forensics and execute those large seizures as well. So that's kind of what brought me here to Asset Reality. For the last few years, I've been trying to, get our app in the IRS CI, get the platform in the IRS CI to manage because, like I'm sure a lot of you are doing, I was using ledgers and software wallets when tokens weren't supported on a ledger or a Trezor. And I had a ton of those everywhere and managing everything with spreadsheets, which was a pain in the butt, to be polite, as you can imagine. And ultimately, that caused reporting problems and delays in getting the metrics that, when you're holding $12 billion, everybody likes to talk about it and report about it. But it's not always easy when all that entire process is manual. So ultimately, Joanna and another guy at our group, U.S. Marshal, said, "Hey, come work for us." And so I was like, "All right, yeah, I like it. I like the idea of our management platform and our seizure app. It makes things a lot more smooth and a lot easier."
Matt, did you say 12 billion?
Yeah, so we've had several seizures since I joined. The original Silk Road wallet, the wallet.dat file that was floating around for years. Mr. X or Person X or Mrs. X, I'd never met them, provided the password for that wallet. And that was our first $1 billion seizure we had. And that was back in 2019, 2020, I think November 2020. And that
Is that the
was,
one? Is that the one Tigran worked on before he left? Or
yes,
maybe, yeah. Okay,
yes,
yeah.
that's the one that's currently being litigated because the US government is trying to liquidate those assets. We also had two other cases. One was a Silk Road hack, which resulted in the initial seizures there was $2.2 billion. And the New York Bitcoin couple, of course, Chris
Hmm.
Janchesky now works with TRM, and they have there was a special about on Netflix about the case called The Biggest Heist. Forensics there, and the first initial seizure there was $3.8 billion. So overall, those tokens, at the time of seizure, the billion, 2.2 billion, and 3.8 billion were at the time of seizure. But of course, now the market fluctuation it's anywhere from 10 to 12 billion. That's for current value.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, just think of that was at the time, and then think about today. It's massive, the amount of money that's there. I remember in 2016 when Bitfinex was hacked, when that hack actually occurred. I just got back from the Europol, the virtual currency conference, and that was shortly after that happened. And I was like, holy moly, that's a lot of Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin was very minimal at that time. It wasn't, was it 2016? I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it was like $300 or $400 a coin, somewhere around there. It wasn't that
About
much.
$72 million at time of.
Yeah, huge. Had some good conversations with Big Phoenix about that. That really hurt them. Of course, they recovered very well, but tough times for Bitcoin. And then to find out that the money is set in just with a couple right there in New York, right? Just like they're just right there. Impressive. I wish I had $1 for every hour I spent trying to find that crypto. Obviously, I couldn't do it. I didn't finish that. It was done by a very competent investigator that used to be IRS, right? Works
Yeah,
for TRM now.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
Yep.
excellent work. Excellent work. I think we're going to move over to Jim now. Let him introduce himself, and we'll go from there. Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Appreciate everybody's time today. Jim Rolls. I spent 21 years as a special agent with the FBI out of the Washington, D.C. area. Retired from the Bureau in May of 23. Did a number of different things throughout my career. Kind of my middle 10 years I spent doing counterterrorism investigations and looking at kind of the terrorist financing aspect of those investigations. And then spent my last 8 years kind of springboarded from that with all the experiences that I got from that into kind of the cyber realm working cryptocurrencies. And my main focus was money laundering over the internet, specifically through cryptocurrency mixers and tumblers. So learned quite a bit about kind of typologies on how the bad guys and bad girls were kind of laundering their money. And then came over to Asset Reality, kind of supporting our areas in helping law enforcement kind of in a forward-leaning way with, deployment of cryptos, trying to remain hidden from the bad guys so that you can conduct your investigations and we can kind of recover, victim funds and things like that. So I've been with Asset Reality now for going on 8 months. It's been quite a journey, a lot of fun.
Hey, Mutt. So, what's your primary duties there at Asset Rally? What are you doing day to day? What's keeping you busy?
We do a lot of, law enforcement support. We're getting kind of the word out on what our products are and what we can do. My main area of focus, just based on my experience and what I've done, is more in the law enforcement agency and department support area, as far as assisting investigators with kind of their pain points, as far as, let's say, they need to get their hands on some crypto in order to conduct investigations or collect intelligence. We can support in those areas. We can help them with kind of hiding in plain sight, if you will, so that we can allow them to do the investigative steps that they need in order to conduct their investigations, complete their investigations. I focus on those areas.
Okay, that seems like something to be right down your alley. I mean, coming from investigations, right? I mean, going right back to it. Jim, tell me about. So you started with FBI. You started not with FBI, but you started crypto. What year again? About
It was roughly 2015.
2015. So you and I have been doing this about the same amount of time, right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, you obviously were involved with the Alpha Bay stuff. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest ones since 2015 until just, I don't know, recently. Is there a bigger one than Alpha Bay recently? That you remember?
Um, the ones that I worked on, we did a lot with the mixers and tumblers that were out
Mm,
there. So I was the lead investigator. If anybody's out there is familiar with Graham's Helix or
mm-hmm.
Bitcoin Fog. Both of those cases actually just finally got finalized in court, where they got sentenced with forfeiture amounts and things like that. So those were two of the larger cases that I worked on. But back when I was at the Bureau, I mean, everybody jumped in and helped with whatever they could. So, Alpha Bay and you name it, anything that had to do with crypto, it
Yeah.
touched we touched on it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah. Graham's Helix, boy, I don't hear that name very often at all anymore. I mean, you hear Bitcoin fog, and of course you hear Tornado Cash and all this, but Graham's Helix, I remember that. That's an old school mixer. That's been from a long time ago, long time ago. So you don't hear that much anymore. Yeah, you
Yeah.
brought back a little memory all of a sudden. It just popped in. My losing my memory thoughts here, but that one stuck around. What was in the early days? And you're not the hook, Matt. So don't smile too loud, brightly over there. You're not the hook yet. I'm getting back to you. Um, Back in the early days, what was the biggest challenge? I mean, I know what the challenges were for us, right? I mean, basically, we thought Bitcoin was like this rocket science thing that we were never going to beat. And I have to hand it to guys like that worked in chain analysis and elliptic when they were first starting. They, you know, they kind of brought some common sense back and said, "Hey, we can do this. This is not that. This is not, it's rocket science, but we can cure it." But what was the biggest challenges you felt, from then? I mean, and moving in now, how has this changed? The world is just not the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think biggest challenges that in some cases continue up to this day is really just kind of experience and kind of the educational piece. There's a lot of great platforms out there, a lot of great tools, a lot of people, such as people on this call that have experience in doing these things, but the world in general, let's say from a law enforcement standpoint, may not know about a lot of this stuff. And that's okay because it just may be something that investigators have not come across. They don't deal with it on a daily basis. But we're starting to see it seep in a little bit more and more these days, where any type of investigation that's going on out there or operation that a law enforcement agent or agency is running is going to touch on crypto, right? Like we're just seeing it more and more. And I'll give you an example. In the early days of when I was kind of working these things, I had a call from a local police department where they didn't have experience in crypto, and they reached out to the FBI and said, "Do you have anybody that might be able to come by and talk with us? Because, we really don't know what we're looking at." And so the call came in, I took it, I traveled up there, I sat down with them, and they had hit a house, and they had a kid that was basically laundering money, and he had purchased a Bitcoin ATM that he had sitting on a coffee table in his living room. And he was just sitting there day by day, just feeding cash into it, putting it on chain, and then moving it wherever he wanted to for whatever reason he had to do that. And so I'm in, the local precinct, and one of the officers walks in. He takes a look at the table with the Bitcoin ATM on it, and he's like, "What is that thing?" And I said, "Oh, it's a Bitcoin ATM." And he goes, "I can see where you put the cash in, but where does the Bitcoin come out?" So it's those types of things where very early on it was like, and you can't fault anybody, right? Because if they've never
Yeah.
dealt with it, they don't know. And I won't sit here and say I know everything, but it made me chuckle inside to say, like, okay, this is what we as law enforcement agencies are dealing with. And so I think the biggest hurdle starting out up front was just recognizing what it is, what's out there, what to look for. And as I said, it just continues to this day, right? Like you don't know until you've had to deal with it.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what it
Yeah.
comes down to. You don't know what you don't know. Matt, I told you I'm coming back to you. So, Jim just told us some of the challenges at the beginning. You got into this a little. I'm gonna say a little late because I've been in this a long time. But tell us how it's morphed. I mean, what was the challenges when you got started? Because Bitcoin was the rage until Ethereum came out in 2016, and we see kind of how that's led into a lot of other things. But what changed in your life when you started doing this, and what's some of the challenges you faced?
Well, like Jim said, and you said, I have it written in my notes as well. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. So you can't be afraid to ask. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I started, getting dropped in our cyber group. And it's like, you're the computer guy doing the forensics. So now you're the crypto guy. And so we go out, I get prepped for a warrant, and I'm learning all this on my own as I go. So starting from there to getting to the point where we have established SOPs and a safer way of doing things was really key. I mean, that one case with Tigran, we like to joke. He called up and said, "Hey, I need another Bitcoin address. Can you hook me up?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll be home in a few minutes." This is during the pandemic. So I create an address for him, And he said, it's only about 64,000. I'm like, okay. And he's like, no, 64,000 Bitcoin. Well, it wasn't just the Bitcoin. It was the Bitcoin, the BSV, the Bitcoin Cash, and the Bitcoin Gold, because the forks from that Silk Road wallet. So when we were done after seizing those assets, I had $1 billion at my house that night, the only one with control of it. And I thought, I'm screaming at IRS, we needed to do better this way, right? So we started from there, get to the point where we have SOPs. You're not really taking a wallet out on site with you. You're not doing things that could put you under that much risk. So it's changed from that point. And again, what I didn't know then and how you learn stuff is kind of interesting. So in the case we work with Jim, you mentioned this while I was smiling earlier with the Helix case. Even that case, that's 3 or 4 years into my, crypto investigation journey, but there's always something new. Until you see it, you don't know it. So we seized a wallet, a Trezor. It's the first time I've seized one. I played with one on the side, right? But we seize it, and through my digital forensics, we find the code and I get access to it. And I see all these transactions going through, right? But it's empty. And later in the back end of the forensics, I find some discussions on different darknet market boards about, how to hide wallets. And so we thought there may be some hidden wallets. Well, ultimately there were. And once we had the passwords for those hidden wallets, we seized about $40 million. So I had that device, $40 million on it, didn't realize it. It's in storage, of course. Again, I didn't know. It's the first time I dealt with that. So part of getting to where I started to where we're at now and where we try to help people is the awareness, right? And know what might be out there. And so that's really one of the biggest pushes I have, and kind of why, I love our agent app and our platform, and just being able to talk, face to face with people like this, even though it's, in this format, but just say, hey, these are the things that you need to be aware of. And there's a lot of pain points, as Jim mentioned, that once and then you know what to look out for. And then it's just a matter of figuring out how to do it, or asking someone, like Jim and Joanna and myself, like, how do we get this done safely, securely?
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. When I started in crypto, we looked at it, or at least I looked at it as a financial investigation. Like it's the same old stuff with a different form of currency or a different value system. The difference here is that, even though you need a financial investigator that's skilled in crypto, you still need that cyber component, right? You can't take the cyber component out, in the same respect as you can't make crypto a cyber investigation solely. Oh, excuse me, sorry guys. So this is really a blending of like two disciplines, right? To make this work, because like you said, Matt, you discovered like hidden wallets. A purely financial investigator is probably not going to find hidden wallets. You need a CFA for that kind of stuff. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you really need someone who's going to be skilled at finding that stuff. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of a big difference that I see in this discipline. It's not CFA, it's not financial, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's kind of blended together a little bit. And you got to have people with all kinds of disciplines, with those, at least those two, to marry up in the middle and make things happen in the middle. So yeah, definitely appreciate that. Joanna, anything you want to chime in on? You want to bring something up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say big picture resources and training are some of the biggest challenges. Scaling a crypto program requires more than just hardware. The staffing piece is really crucial for separation of duties, for adequate security, and for auditing. And we hear this internationally, that we're just spread too thin. We don't have enough resources. Some of the asset management units we work with maybe only have 1 or 2 people working in them. So it's just not feasible that they'll be able to do everything themselves in-house. And then training, as we all mentioned, training I think is key, especially like public-private partnerships with training. Not just the Marshal Service, but all seizing agencies. It's difficult to stay up to date on how to seize and manage crypto. And I think there's a lot more opportunities now than there ever was when we all first started working in this. At Asset Reality, and while I was still in the government, we got a lot of calls from state and local agencies that needed help. And we weren't always in a position federally to support that, just because of the workload we had to do. But we do a lot of work, like with Operation Shamrock here at Asset Reality. So helping Aaron West's Operation Shamrock, victims of pig butchering schemes, and really just doing a lot of local training and education so that people do know what to look for.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up romance scams and investment scams and Operation Shamrock. They're doing a great job. Aaron West, I'll give a shout out to Aaron. Thank you for everything you're doing out there. We appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of victims appreciate it as well. Um, you know, so all this is goes to all three of you. Today, we know what the difference is between like 10 years ago and now. What are some of the best practices today you see for asset forfeiture? Um, and not only that, let's talk about first what are some best practices for sending crypto, number one, because that's like the first step, right? Getting off a violator's wallet under your own or something you control. So what's the best steps there? And then what are some of the best steps for actually holding and seizing and then maybe liquidating? Anyone want to take that on?
I could start on the seizure part.
Sure, go ahead.
I think especially when you're first getting to it, it's good to keep up with current trends and maybe read some boards, Reddit or darknet market boards if you have that ability to see what kind of wallets are being used, what are the current trends in wallets use, and sort of familiarize yourself with the various types of wallets. That way, if you come across them, you have a little bit of understanding. Secondly is, have your SOPs and procedures in place. So when you're actually going to execute that seizure, that you're going to copy your address from one spot each time, not from your program or however you're working. That way you can avoid what's called address poisoning, where people, once you send a test transaction and that's on the blockchain, there is people that attempt to hijack the middle of that transaction by address poisoning. And essentially what that does is changes the beginning and the end of your address, make it look very similar. And then the middle is different. So you have to rely on your protocols and make sure you're doing everything the same way each time and following each step and take your time. So again, that's something we can lay out a little more specifically on the seizure aspect.
Yeah, address poisoning. That's kind of a big thing these days. I think it was DEA that had an issue with that not too long ago, right?
Yeah, DEA agent lost like 50 grand, and that was,
Yeah.
and I had it myself. And so what I do now, like what I was doing with the government, sometimes you send like 0.1 Bitcoin as a test, right? Well, that's a flag, or 0.1 Ethereum, that's a flag. So they use random amounts. And then again, if you're using something initially now, you won't have that when you're using our app, by the way, and our platform. But if you're doing it manually and using a say Ledger Live, make sure you're not copying directly from Ledger Live itself. Have your source document and go back and copy that address again when you're making your second transaction.
Yeah, that's good advice. Not copying from the device itself. The device could be corrupted, right? I'm not going to call the exchange out, but I'm going to say a major exchange. I was doing an investigation not too long ago, and a major exchange, their test transaction was $10 even every time. And you could follow it $10 every time. And then right after that $10 transaction, they were doing multi-million-dollar sends. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if you're a man in the middle attack or you have a wallet that's programmed not to execute the attack unless you're over 100 grand, you're going to get this exchange every single time. They're going to fall for it until they fix it. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's very important. Don't be predictable. If you're predictable, you're setting yourself up, no doubt about it. So, Joanna, you want to take a shot at what are some of the best things for holding? Once you've seized, like what are the best things for holding? That's a lot of law enforcement departments. They go to our training. We talk to them. We're not as good at seizures you guys are, but we can talk a little bit. Have two people present, make the transfer, test transactions. Keep it offline. The basic stuffs. But what are some of the things you would recommend, from a professional asset seizure company to folks out there?
Yeah, I think you hit on all the main points for sure, but just having those standard operating procedures and making sure you're following the process internally the same time each way, making sure everyone knows their role and just knows what to do, and really having enhanced auditability functions. It's not like having a car where you're going to put a value in every 3 to 6 months. It doesn't really change that much. Maybe you have to account for an oil change on it. Crypto, the value is changing so frequently. You want to be able to make sure that you can actually run a report and see today's value, see where things are heading. Maybe you have a bunch of forfeiture orders come in at once. Well, you want to do that planning to make sure that you're not affecting the market with a liquidation. So maybe you run a report that morning, you see, oh wow, we have hundreds of millions to liquidate today. Just having that awareness and being able to see your whole portfolio, I think, is really important. And then in terms of liquidations too, I think best practice is really using an OTC and utilizing public-private partners to help get the best rates to make sure you're giving back to the victims as much as possible if it's a victim's case. And also working with those experts so you're not affecting market. Like you mentioned earlier that those earlier auctions might have tanked the market a little bit. And sometimes it's public perception. It's, you know, someone sees something on the blockchain move and then the industry panics, even though they might not actually have the right address. They might not actually know what's occurring or when it's occurring.
Yeah, that's exactly, yeah. So I get this question a lot when I'm out there doing my thing, you know, training law enforcement agencies. There's always we always try to get prosecutors in a room with us because you know that's the other half of the equation here is getting the prosecution done when you can. And the prosecutors always ask me, so what do we seize? Do we seize the value or do we seize the token? So that meaning, do we get a seizure warrant and go to cash, or do we get a seizure warrant and ask for the Bitcoin or the other or the crypto itself? You know, that's the age-old question. Which one do you seize, and is there logic behind it?
So I definitely had that problem early on, especially with some of our forfeiture orders, where after currency had forked, it wasn't accounted for in the original court order. So that was the whole conversation. Like, do we go back and get it added? And the answer there was no. It's kind of like if you seize an animal and the animal has a baby, you're now responsible for the baby too. But we did have other cases too where people used an exact dollar amount, and then that was really a lessons learned because the rest of those funds needed to be returned to the defendant because that's what the court order said. So in my opinion, you always want to use the currency amount, maybe use approximately, try to give yourself some room. But if you put a dollar figure in there, you're really trapped with that dollar figure.
Yeah, I usually tell them, look, if you seize a Red Ranger, you give them back a Red Ranger. If you seize a Bitcoin, you give them a Bitcoin back. So don't change the Bitcoin into dollars, and then, you know, because you're looking at valuation problems after that. I mean, because crypto's volatile, unless you're seizing like USDT or something, right? Because it's a dollar. So you seize a Ford Red Ranger, give them back a Ford Red Ranger if you have to. So that's kind of what I'm glad I'm on the right page. I'd hate to be wrong about that because I've trained with a few people. So I'm glad I wasn't wrong about that. Go ahead, Matt.
To add to that, I mean, IRS classifies it as property. So when you
Yes, that's exactly right.
So that's what we did at IRS. We seized the property, and it was, we went off the quantity. Sure, we love to talk about again that $12 billion because it sounds sexy, right? But we seized the quantity of Bitcoin and the quantity of Ethereum and the quantity of XRP. So
Yeah.
that's what we go off of.
And that's the thing. Crypto is not money in the United States. I mean, the matter of its use, yes, but I don't, unless something's changed, we still haven't got to the point where crypto is classified as money, right? Like money.
No.
So, but the matter of use, it certainly does act that way. So, Jim, chime in here. What do you think? What do you think about the seizures and how it's still working these days, and what can be better?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said. And just kind of from my own experience, to the point that you all have made. I mean, whenever we seized anything, as part of our paperwork with our procedures, we would put, as Joanna said, kind of an estimated value on the date that it was seized. But we always held everything in whatever was seized, kind of to your Red Ranger example. If we seized Bitcoin, we would hold it in Bitcoin until the case was adjudicated, everything was finished up, just in case the possibilities out there, right, that a defendant may win and something may happen. You can just return back exactly what you took, and the market's going to do what the market's going to do. That doesn't, that's not on the investigating agency. So if you keep it in the form that you've seized it in and just say, I seized 100 Bitcoin, and then once you get to the end of it, then you can look at liquidating that. Or if you have to return it for some reason, then you're just returning back exactly what you took. And I think that's probably the best way to do things, because it is what it is.
Yeah, it's what it is, right? I mean, that's an age-old statement, but it is what it is. Give it back what you got. So we got about I don't know, about maybe less than 10 minutes to continue talking, and then I'm gonna open up for questions. But I do want to use this quick 10 minutes to get your thoughts on at least two things. So the crypto world right now that we're in, right? It's gone a long way. I mean, we have changed. Like there's a whole rolling of technology and things are changing. Um, and this is to Jim and Matt. So what do you think the challenges of tomorrow are going to be in crypto?
Well, I think the
Great.
continuation of identification first. It still starts with training. It starts with knowledge and background and doing as much OSINT as possible and keeping up with the emerging technologies. It will evolve. It has continued to evolve. And it's a matter of just being aware. Again, keep saying it. I certainly don't know anything. If you don't know, you don't know. It's a matter of, trying to stay on top of it and continue to research and be on the forefront of it. And those sources, like, the OSINT sources are great because you can get an idea what the criminals are talking about and what they're testing, what they're playing with. And it's a good way for me to stay on the forefront.
OSINT, good comments. Jim, where do you think we're going tomorrow? What's gonna happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Matt's point, like you don't know what you don't know, right? So there's constant evolving in the marketplace of, it used to be that everybody was only in Bitcoin. And then you have all these other tokens that get, kind of published and people start using them. And they're on different chains and there's different tracing that can happen on those, good and bad, and quite honestly, we're all trying to evolve, right? From our side, from the good guys side, right? We're learning as much as we can. We're trying to stay on top of all these things, but the bad guys are doing the same exact thing, right? So you have a great case that an agency or a department works on, and then anybody can go in and read what's published as far as what the court opinion was and kind of what's out there as far as investigative steps. And we're reading those things from our side to try and learn like what worked. But don't be fooled because the bad guys are out there reading the same things. Like, what is it? Where did we mess up that gave law enforcement an in to be able to track us, to be able to find us? And they're constantly evolving as well. Moving a lot of their operations to overseas exchanges, where those overseas exchanges may not be receptive or responsive to U.S. law enforcement, paperwork. So, those changes are, I mean, those issues are going to constantly be out there. And we've just kind of, like Matt said, we've got to stay at the forefront. We've got to keep just educating ourselves and learning as much as we can and trying to stay ahead of it as much as we can.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about, they're looking at what they've done wrong too. When you're talking about these types of scams that are so rich in financial instruments like crypto in this case, when they make a mistake, they do after action reports on it. They literally go look at what went wrong. That may be a newsflash to some people, but the illicit actors here are not stupid people. They are smart people as well. And for my law enforcement friends on this call, and prosecutors and anyone in legal profession, when you're doing a crypto case, when you can, and it's something new and different, try to seal that case. I mean, if you can get it sealed, please seal that case. At least try to protect what you can on your methodologies, so we can get just a little farther down the road before they start changing again, before the bad actors start changing. So I know the federal government's pretty good at doing that. That's kind of a thing. Seal the case when you can. So yeah, I mean, we don't know what's coming at us, and the exchanges offshore. That is something that has to be dealt with. I'm not sure how we deal with it yet. Offshore exchanges that don't cooperate. I mean, it makes things difficult. We all know that. But this isn't the banking industry. I mean, you can pretty much start an exchange tomorrow anywhere you want. If you can afford it, that is. It's pretty expensive these days. So, Joanna, I do want to ask you before we get close to a Q&A. Tell me about the training that Asset Reality has, and what you feel like is the best, not only the best part of the training, but why people would need it. What do you guys offer there?
So our most recent training is our virtual asset transfer fundamentals training. We call it VATIF. and it's designed for anyone who seizes and manages crypto. So the course handles best practices to not make mistakes and maintain control of your crypto. One of my favorite parts is there's a lot of practical exercises. So you get hands-on experience in creating wallets and actually transferring crypto. So to me, the most important aspect of it is the confidence that you build in being able to do this type of work. You don't need any prior crypto training or knowledge to take the course. You'll go over some cryptocurrency basics, establish how virtual assets work. You'll learn how to create and secure virtual wallets. So generating wallets from existing seed phrases, and the significance of derivation paths and wallet recreation. And then most of all, like I said, I think it's really just the developing your skills and gaining the confidence, because you're going to work in a testnet environment. So you'll actually send and receive testnet versions of crypto. So practicing those transfers in that safe environment so that when the real thing happens, you've already done it before, I think is really key. We're running our next class starting March 11th. And it's something I really wish I had had over the years when I worked worked in this both in the government and even when I started Asset Reality, because I don't think it existed prior. So we have collectively, our company just has hundreds of years of experience in investigations and asset forfeiture. So there's a lot of good people that went into building the course. So I think it's really useful.
I wish I had it. Obviously, I wish I had it too.
Me too.
The other really good thing about it is awareness, and it's awareness, and you recognize, again, it's made for someone who doesn't have any experience by any means, so you can start from the basic level. And you recognize, we had a call the other day with a foreign law enforcement partner. It's the first time they seized a ledger, had zero training, and the forensic guys, as we know, were a little apprehensive to even touch it. And within a 5-minute call, I was able to help them walk through and realize that it was, a clean device. So just the actual awareness part and the confidence of being able to do it before you go out and do it, before you go out and push that button and transfer funds for the first time. It's a little nerve-wracking, I can tell you, having sat in that seat.
Yeah, because once you push that button, it's not coming back. I mean, that's fully committed right there. And I don't know about you guys, but I think in the earlier days, the concept of test transactions hadn't really come around yet. I mean, it's a simple thing to think of, but it still hadn't actually made its way around. And I know one or two that might have sent some funds to the wrong place, but we won't talk about those things, right? Those early experiences. Maybe keeping a lot of stuff stored on one of these in your desk, right? Don't do that anymore either. Joanna, does Asset Reality charge for that training? Is that something, is there a cost? Can law enforcement like set up classrooms where you guys go out there and train them? And tell me a little more about how people would get the training if they wanted it.
Yeah, so we can send out a link to our website where you can register online for the course. We do also do that type of bulk discount like you're talking about, like if an entire agency or a large group wants an in-person training, we can certainly work with you on the cost. Occasionally we give out, a free seat here or there. So always feel free to reach out to us, ask questions.
I'm volunteering.
Yeah, always reach out and ask. But I'd say the first place to start would be the website. But then we're happy to field any questions if there's a specific way you'd like to see the training structured in person, online.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Do you have a law enforcement support line? I'm sure there's a lot of people, or just a general support line for companies and law enforcement that maybe are looking at seizing something or holding something. Do you guys have a support line where people can call you and maybe ask you a quick question or two?
I would start with crypto@assetreality.com as an email. Start there, and I'm happy to put out my contact information as well. I think it's actually in all our LinkedIn profiles. But generally, that's where we see the most traffic, is just someone emailing the crypto@assetreality.com mailbox with any type of scenario.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'm sure there's lots of questions from agencies who maybe are just doing this for the first time. To everybody out there in the audience, we're going to open up the Q&A. I do have just one question right now, and I don't. John asks, "Is this what is referred to as specific performance versus monetary damage?" I think we're talking about seizures, the Red Ranger thing. So anyone, I don't quite understand what specific performance versus monetary damages. Anyone got any thoughts on that? So, So probably more of a legal question, so no worries. Okay, thanks, John. Anyway, if you got questions for the panel, let me know. You can throw them in the chat. If not, we're going to continue on here. So as you guys worked through crypto cases in the early days, this is for Matt and Jim. Um, what did it mean to have, like, Chainalysis, Elliptic, Merkle, Big, TRM, come along as their platforms advanced? Did you guys find that to be, you know, not only helpful, obviously, but what are some things that you felt like maybe could have been better, or, you know, along that line as far as blockchain analytics? And does it help at all? I mean, is it more the data that you guys are looking for and less the tracing, or, how did that play out for you? Were those tools exceptionally helpful or just somewhat helpful?
So I'll jump in first, and then Matt, you can add if you want to. Yeah, I mean, in the early stages, in the early days, I mean, you think of, like, let's say, traditional money laundering investigations, and you've got people that have, typology wise, use checks, use cash. You can go to, a bank, you can subpoena records, you can get things that are like on a piece of paper where you can just sit down and you can go through
Mm-hmm.
those transaction records and kind of follow the money, if you will, right? And then, the cryptoverse, if you will, came out, and it's like, okay, well, how do we follow that? And there's some great tools that are out there to assist investigators with, you know, tracking and tracing what happened when, where did it go, what did it touch on, all those types of things. So, I used them a lot in my investigative experience. Um, and honestly, all the tools that are out there, I would say that it really was just kind of a comfort level, right? On how easy or how difficult the tools were to use, what you got out of them, and what you were looking for. I'd have specific investigations where some of them would actually give some great information and some further info and intel that you could use to further your investigation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're very useful from the standpoint of being able to see what's happening in kind of a quick snapshot. Everything is right there contained, and some of them do a great job as far as what they collect and what they can actually report to you and give you. Um, it's just a matter, again, as we kind of then talking about, of kind of knowledge and education. So the tools are out there. Do you use them? Do you have the budget to be able to secure them?
Mm-hmm.
And then learning and just getting in there and actually practicing and just kind of stumbling through, right? If you don't
Yeah.
have the money to be able to be trained on it, but you can still get in there and use it, then it's just kind of a trial and error thing. Get in there, see what you see what's useful, see what's helpful. They are very helpful. It's just a matter of getting in there and practicing and kind of getting that education and that knowledge to be able to have them be useful for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would tell the audience that, using these tools, all of them, it's kind of like what we say, like, we're constructing a case, right? This is just a building block. It's not the block. It's one of the building blocks. And even though you get a lead off one of these tools, you still need to verify that lead somehow. So, that way you're bringing the best evidence to court, and you're not just bringing, like, oh, this person said it was. Matt, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, as an investigator, you want as much intel about your investigation as possible. And this is just another tool, as we're mentioning, it's part of that overall picture of your investigation. For me personally, on the back end of that, it helps me with the procedure planning. So I have an expectation of what we're looking at if we go on site. I know this guy's dealing with this type. I have the wallets prepped for my SOPs, everything's safe where it needs to be. So I have a better understanding of what I'm walking into. Again, anytime you can walk into a residence, the more information I have, the better, right? When you're going to go
Mm-hmm.
kick that door down. So the more intel on any investigation, the better. And this has really helped out. Now, it can't be the only piece. Sometimes it may be the only piece, but then you have to do your legwork.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can't be the only piece. You got to do legwork to go with it, and that's what I think. Investigators, once they start this path, they start realizing that this is just one piece. Like the blockchain analytics, it's just one piece. You still have to substantiate everything you're seeing, and then you have to get into the seizures when you get that far. And you brought up a
Mhm.
good point, Matt. the blockchain is a good indication of what you're going to walk into. You can already have like a cluster analysis done. That this person may hold more than one wallet. There may be different currencies involved and different things. So this is just like one piece of a much bigger pie, and these tools really help you out get down the road.
Robert,
So yes, ma'am.
that's a great point, that it's, the investigation part is really the first piece, and then you move into that management and disposal part of things, which is really like where we come in and why we exist to help. If you look at these asset forfeiture programs, they're giving back to schools, drug rehab facilities, they're building highways, but it's the follow through where it really counts. And I think a lot of the time we see like a really cool headline of those huge cases that we've talked about, but it's the follow through where it really matters. You can't just do the investigation. You have to actually get to the forfeiture and get those asset forfeiture funds put back in the pot. So yeah, I think the whole process is important, and we're here to help tackle it.
You're absolutely right. The entire process is important, but I worked dope, and I've worked guns, and I've worked money. But I'll tell you, if you want to disrupt an organization, an illicit a criminal organization, get the money, right? I mean, the money is what hurts the most. And you're right. After the seizure, it's all about what happens next and how you're going to manage that process. So I absolutely agree with that, Joanna. I do have a question here from Mr. McDevitt. Are we seeing an increase in attacks on registered crypto exchanges? We have seen scenarios where criminals are even pretending to be law enforcement to get information on firms, systems, and controls. So, anyone want to take a shot at that? You guys seen anything along that line?
I would
Well,
say not
go
since
ahead.
the one case I worked, obviously the Bitfinex case. Anytime you have a co-mingling, or like, why rob one guy on the street when you can rob a bank, right? So we know that they're easy targets, and with cybercrime as it is, it's no doubt that that's going to increase. Yes, we've now, 3 of my largest seizures were directly related to markets, or with the Bitfinex exchange itself. So when you have a large amount of funds, that's public knowledge that you're going to make yourself a target. Now, again, having been out for 6 months, I can't tell you what the current trend is, but I wouldn't be surprised if that continues.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from doing investigations quite often over here, is there is some very technical actors in the crypto world. The North Koreans being one of them, certainly the Chinese. So to see them pretend to be in law enforcement or any other phishing attempt to get inside an exchange's systems and controls, that would not be unusual for me to hear about. I would be like, that sounds pretty normal. So the answer to your question is, there's always an attack on registered crypto exchanges because most of our hot wallets are, if they're hot, people can see what's going in. The only way to generally get to that crypto is through some type of phishing or social engineering. So other than hacking, it's been done before, and I'm afraid it's going to continue. So yes, and yes, Mr. McDevitt. Scott Simon's on this call. Hey, Scott, how you doing? Scott says, how can asset reality help state and locals? Yeah, can you help state and locals? You want a shot of that?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, let me get the whole question here. I didn't scroll it down. How can asset reality help state and locals, even if you even can, in the burn and reissue process of Tether, since they're only onboarding federal agencies? I'm not really sure what that means exactly. I have a good relationship with federal partners and to adopt blocklisted USDT seizures, but I know most state and locals do not. Currently, state and locals are blocklisted in USDT, but Tether will not do the reissue part to state and local. So the question, I think, is if you blocklist Tether, and you're trying to get them to burn it and then mint it again, how do you handle the seizure? Does that make sense?
I can just say high level, we are working on that in Operation Shamrock to try to find a solution. It is a problem that comes up pretty frequently. But yes, we can work with state and local in general for either training or platform use, if anyone wants
Okay.
to add.
Yeah, that's interesting, Scott. Having a trouble with Tether doing the reissue or the minting. Yeah, let's talk about that some more, Scott. Here is another question. Hi, I'm a local I'm a law enforcement officer from Kolkata, India. Hope I said that right. I have a question to Jim. What should we do if we find fixed float or change now swap service in the analysis? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, again, based on kind of things that I've done in my experience, a lot of bad actors, if you will, they would try and hide activity as much as they could as far as where their funds were, what they were doing with them. So, a lot of swap services where you're changing from Bitcoin to ETH or Bitcoin to USDT or, whatever the case may be as far as the tokens that are out there. So I would say number one, a lot of times what we would find is there's still like signatures that are out there from the tracking and tracing tools, right? So you're looking for any kind of pattern that you can discern, timing, percentages they're paying in transaction fees, those types of things, like anything that you can kind of hone in on that would give you an indication of trying to kind of track and follow that money, if you will. A lot of the bigger mixers that I worked on, they always had kind of a flat fee as far as what the percentage was, as far as what they were charging. They would tell their clients, don't send in, a round amount, send in something random. But, a 7% fee on $10,000 or a 7% fee on 9232 is still 7%. So there's still a way to kind of go back on chain and look for those types of things. So those swap services, if they're not responsive to, let's say, like law enforcement service of, subpoenas, search warrants, whatever the case may be, a lot of those tools that we were discussing earlier, there's still a way that you can go in if you've got the right knowledge to be able to kind of still get you to where you need to be to see, like, this is kind of our not best guess, but this is based on experience, like where we see that this transaction happened, what happened to it, when, and where it swapped to. And then you have to maybe jump to another chain and try and trace it that way. So, a lot of people out there are doing those types of things. We see that quite a bit. And there's ways to help with following that if you've got the right tools in place.
Interesting. Swaps are definitely they're not the thing of the future because they're going on now. And then, token swaps and then chain swapping is much more prevalent than ever. So, if you're tracing in the law enforcement or even the FIU communities, get familiar with swaps and start learning how to master them because they're out there. There's a lot of going on. Lloyd Clark says, do you see AI affecting crypto investigations / seizure negatively or positively moving forward? You want to take a shot of that? All right, we'll give it to Joanna. She's the guru here. How's AI going to affect investigations and seizures? Is it going to be positive, negative, and what do you see happening?
I think it's going to be a bit negative. I think it's going to make things a bit more difficult, but I think like we have in the past, we'll find a solution and we'll fight back.
We'll fight back. I like that.
I'm hoping that Chain and TRM and Merkle and all the tracing tools, have some ninja AI that can help trace through swaps and stuff like that. Maybe that could be an area of positive development.
Yeah, it can be done. We already do auto tracing on our platform, but I relish the day when we have a system to where we can say, here's the start point, find the end point, or if you get to a swap, maybe a chain swap, you can just ask AI to find the in transfer and the out transfer on both sides of the bridge, right? So you're on this side of the bridge, that side of the bridge, find me both of them, and then this should keep going. That would be a positive thing. The negative side of that would be it gets it wrong, right? And you spend the next day or two going down the wrong rabbit hole when you're like, I'm not even on the same continent no more. I should be way over here and I'm over here, which is a crypto investigator's nightmare, right?
Nightmare, yeah.
The rabbit hole. So yes. And then Mr. Marks asks, do I need previous law enforcement training to train in this field? because I'm interested in the course. I know for us, Kenneth, you don't need to be law enforcement. We'll train you. I love bringing investigators on. What about you guys, Joanna?
No previous experience needed, my opinion.
Yeah, if you want to do it, there's a lot of good investigators out here that do it already. You can get trained and get started as well. So yes. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, it is 10 o'clock on the dot. 1 hour has gone by. I told you this would be fast and furious. It just seems like time flies. But that brings us to a close. And I want to thank everybody for being on this call with Asset Reality. We appreciate it. Like I said, this is our first Merkle Meets. We're going to do more. If you have somebody you think should be on here to sit in the hot seat, let us know. We'd be happy to ask them to sit on our show. Have a great day, everybody. Great evening. And Matt, Jim, and Joanna, thank you very much for joining me. You've been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.